Hi, this is Sarah Lister from Sheffield Digital. I'm talking to Ryan Temple, who is Head of Product Development at TES, to ask him about his job and career development. Can you start by telling us about your current role at TES?
Yeah, sure. So, as you said, so the head of product development at TES, and what that effectively means is I look after a number of teams across a few different products. So there's around 6 teams in my area, with some based out in Australia, some based in Scotland, some in Wales, some in England as well. So I suppose day to day, I'm kind of helping and supporting grow the teams and working on the sort of more strategic technical view of the products. So that might be supporting them with recruitment or working out how we create common services or reduce duplication, that kind of thing.
What are the core skills that you need for your role?
So I suppose it's primarily a people role. So a lot of what I do is kind of coaching people, working with them, influencing stakeholders, all of that kind of stuff. I do still need technical skills. I'm obviously from a technical background, and that's important as well because you need to still be able to have an understanding, albeit at a high level, of what's going on in the individual teams. So that might be sort of reviewing new architectural proposals or suggesting different ways that we might go, different products that we might use, that kind of thing.
And what's the most challenging part of your job, would you say?
That's a good question. I think that the most challenging part is, whenever you work in a company, you have to find out that the sort of best way to use what you've got at your disposal. So when you've got 3 teams, 3 completely different products, you might have them all having sort of competing things that they need and that they want to do, and you have to try and find a way to sort of put those in a priority order, but also do that in a way that you can explain that to people so that people can understand why actually we might not be doing that particular thing now, or we might we are going to do this, we're going to bring it forward, that kind of thing. There's always something going on in all the areas, right, where you have to kind of try and balance. So that balance between all the different competing priorities is the biggest challenge, I think.
How does your role fit into the sort of bigger picture of TES?
Sure. So the bit that we missed off at the start is that as I mentioned, I'm one of the heads of product development, and my area at TES is what's known as pupil and learner management. So all of our products cover things that kind of manage day to day in the classroom. So we have our parents' evenings and room bookings products. So during the pandemic, we obviously offered a lot of remote first parents' evenings where people can kind of log on and have appointments with teachers. We have products called class charts and provision maps. And some of these are a bit, I know when I started, the kind of provision map, if you're a teacher will know exactly what a provision map is, but it's probably quite a bespoke term otherwise. But class charts basically is manages attendance and behavior for students. So, traditional sort of thing of doing registers, but adding extra functionality on that to where we can kind of say, these are some of the behavioral incidents or challenges that you've had during the day. And actually, if you shuffle the seating plan round, then you can get better behavioral outcomes because you can say that this child, when they're sat next to this child, tends to misbehave. So you can sort of move things around a little bit and hopefully create more productive classrooms. Provision maps are, so that's focused on special education needs students. So provision map is basically a document that a school has to produce that sort of says these are all the things that we're putting in place. So our software helps them manage that and helps them kind of track everything that they're doing for students, share it with other teachers. They can also then use that as evidence for things like Ofsted and apply for more funding and say that, we've been able to do these things, and, that therefore means they can get more funding. And the last part is a company out in Australia called Edval, which does timetabling. So this is creating your students' timetables for the year, which is obviously a really interesting and technically complex area. If you've got a school of a couple of thousand students and, I don't know, 100 teachers and however many lessons, trying to create a timetable that meets them all can be quite interesting. So yeah, all of our products, I suppose, are focused around actually managing the day-to-day of the school and the pupils and what they do. So it's a really good area to work in, actually, because you know, you've got a very kind of a very real positive impact to what we're doing. You know, you take provision maps for an example. Like if the outcome of people using our product means that they can have more time or get more funding to work with their pupils, that's, you know, fantastic for them, right?
How does the communication work then, sort of between you or the company and the schools? And how involved are you personally with that line of communication?
So our product managers would usually be the ones that manage the requirements. So it's not something that I have a lot of direct involvement with, but they do. Thinking about the class charts team, I know they have incredibly good relationships, and we'll, you know, go into schools and see how they're doing things, and you know, you get your kind of feedback and ideas for new features directly from the schools, and we can kind of then bring them into the product, right? But yeah, our product teams and I design teams are the ones that are involved in that. But I think because of the kind of products that we've got, all of my engineers are really invested, and they really understand the kind of the reasons why we're building something, which is, as someone in my position, that's really good, because sometimes it can be easy for engineering to almost be a little bit detached from actually the reality of what we're doing and why we're doing it. But with the sort of set of products that we work on, we've got a really powerful sort of anchor for the teams to kind of base themselves around.
And as well as the technical skills, would you say that your job and the work of your team involves some creativity as well?
Definitely. I'd always say that software engineering and coding is a creative industry, really. Like it's, you know, for some of our products, we're solving problems that perhaps haven't been solved elsewhere, or tackling really complex things, and you've got to have that bit of creativity about the stuff that you do to sort of make that work. And there's also a little bit of thinking of how do we present this. You know, in some cases we do have very complex things, and we have to think about how we present that information, or put that system in front of people that makes it easy to use while keeping the complexity, because, you know, then some of that's needed. But ultimately, teachers are really time poor, they're really busy, so we need to make that as simple to understand as possible.
And what's it like for you working for a global company?
I think it's really good. Like it's there's obviously challenges with it. Like, you know, with a team out in Australia, that means that time zones can be difficult. There's not a lot of crossover. I think we've sort of got into between like a 7 and 9 in the morning will give us a little bit of crossover to do things. So there's a challenge there for me, to sort of create a culture that spans all of those teams and all of those time zones, right? Because left to its own devices, people probably wouldn't naturally communicate with each other, because it can be quite challenging. But equally, it's really interesting to get a different view on things. Like you know, we probably all have assumptions that we don't realize about the UK school system. We just think this is how schools work. But actually, if you speak to the team out in Australia when they're doing timetables, it's completely different. You know, the way that lessons are planned and everything is completely different, which means that we have to constantly be thinking, well, actually, let's make sure this is not a UK specific angle on this, that we're thinking broader. And having a team that is global helps us do that a little bit, because you've always got that other viewpoint of, you know, we do things differently in Australia or wherever.
So after talking about some of the challenges of the job, which parts do you really enjoy doing?
So I enjoy mostly building teams and developing people. So I think what's really interesting about software engineering sometimes is that you kind of start out your career, and as you progress, you almost do less and less of it. It's a strange thing, right? Where we kind of go to university or you know, train up, however, for a while, start doing it, and then as you move up, you do less and less of it. But luckily for me, I kind of really enjoy developing teams and developing people, and I get just as much satisfaction out of creating a team that works really well, or helping someone make that step in their career, as I did when I was sort of actively writing code, you know, day in, day out. So That's the most enjoyable thing for me. And I think also that the chance to kind of give back sounds a little cheesy, but yeah, because you know, I feel really lucky to have done what we've been able to do in software engineering, because you get a lot of opportunities from doing it. And so because of the position I'm in now, we're able to do things like creating apprenticeship schemes. That means we can get people involved in software engineering that perhaps wouldn't have been able to get involved before, and being able to offer those opportunities is something I really enjoy.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think the education system in Sheffield is really looking out for those types of opportunities to work with companies.
Yeah, definitely. It's and actually being able to work in Sheffield is really good for me, because I'm from the area and I've sort of always moved around for jobs. So coming over to TES has meant that I can actually work almost back home, which is really nice.
Brilliant. And do you work in the office, or do you work from home, or do you have a kind of hybrid model?
So we do, yeah, it's a hybrid model. We are mostly home based. What we do is that we will aim to go in perhaps once a week, but what I say to teams and what we try and do is that the office is for different things than working at home is. So we try and avoid just going to the office to put headphones on and sit doing the exact same things that we do at home, because why would you do that? So we'll actually say, right, well, let's all go in together on a day and we'll do some workshop something up, or do a bit of a session on how we think we're doing as a team, or something like that. So we'll kind of bring everyone together for specific things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great. And how much experience did you already have before you joined TES? Because you're now head of product development. So it'd be really interesting to hear about your career progression.
Yeah, sure. So I obviously just started in this role. I think I've got, doing my maths, about 10 years total experience before then. So I held a similar role for a pharmacy chain previously. Prior to that, I worked as a team lead at the BBC, so working on BBC Bitesize and the education stuff. And yeah, so I kind of started from that, out of uni, software engineering to senior software engineer, and then I think it's sort of 3.5, 4 years as a team lead before then stepping up into that head of role in a couple of companies. So yeah, around 10 years is where I'm at, and that was kind of mainly working in the technologies that my team's working now. But obviously you've got that as you move into roles like the one I'm in now. Actually, some of the teams that I work with are technologies that I'm perhaps not familiar with from a hands-on kind of sense. So there's an interesting challenge there to understand at a high level I suppose the pros and cons, or the things that we need to be careful of when using things that perhaps you've not used personally yourself.
And do you think that going to university had a positive impact on your career?
I think so, yeah. I went to Sheffield University, and I always I had a manager who used to talk about it. So what's your unfair advantage? And I think when I finished uni, my unfair advantage was that the fourth year at Sheffield University gives you 6 months of hands-on team working experience. So you work for a small software company that does real jobs for real companies. And that was brilliant, because that meant that when I was coming into my first job, I'd already got that experience of working to deadlines, working in a team, managing expectations, all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, having said that, I mentioned about like apprenticeships and things. I'm a big supporter of that, and I think if I was 18 now and thinking about what I'd do, it'd be a hard choice about whether I went down the kind of apprenticeship route and got that more sort of hands-on work experience earlier, or whether I still went and did a degree.
So have you actually had an apprentice on your team?
So we are due in TES to start with our apprentices in 10 days time, actually. Wow. So I've had apprentices on teams in previous companies. So when I worked at the BBC and when I worked for Well Pharmacy, we had apprentices in our teams as well. And yeah, that, I think my first experience was at the BBC, and what I got out of that was that someone, they came out of college and did a 4-year degree apprenticeship with us. Actually, at the end of that 4 years, they were in quite an advanced position in their career, because they got 4 years of actually doing doing the delivery and delivering software as well as having some of the formal learning. So they kind of almost had the best of both worlds. Yeah, so we've got them in, and I think it's really important in terms of, I was the first person in my family to go to university, and I know that it's even more expensive now than when I went, and not everyone can afford that, not everyone's got the time to do it. So the fact that there are alternative routes in is really good, because it opens up the number of people that we can access.
What's been the most valuable part of your education or career development to get to where you are now?
So I think education-wise, it was what I was saying about the University of Sheffield, the fourth year, like industrial placement or company placement that they do as part of their degree. That was hugely beneficial early on, because it meant when I got into jobs, I hit the ground running, because I knew what was expected. I knew how to do things, basically. In terms of career development, I think actually the pandemic generated a lot of opportunities I was at BBC at the time. It generated a huge amount of opportunities for us, because it created such a change in how people were doing things, particularly in education. Everything had to move online, so that was just kind of like a complete change that opened up things and gave us opportunities there. So I think that was probably that probably accelerated my development and gave me situations that really challenged me, because I suppose that's what you need, right? You need something difficult to sort of push you along.
And what's it like working for TES?
It's really great. It's a really, really collaborative environment, a really, really good team culture. Everyone's incredibly supportive. The fact that we've got that cause, or that thing that we're working for, is good. Like, we've got quite a few people that have perhaps got education backgrounds. They might have been teachers, or they might have been involved in education in some way and have moved into roles. I've got software engineers who retrained after being teachers and moved into software engineering. So you definitely get that satisfaction of you're doing something that makes a difference to teachers and ultimately to students, which is really good.
And what do you recommend as the best starting point to get into product development?
So I think in terms of training, if people are starting completely fresh, then looking out for apprenticeships and things like that, boot camps if possible. But again, I know that's not always, people have not always got the time or money to invest in those things. Product development is an interesting term, right? And it's a very conscious choice that we've made here at TES, which is that what we build is focused on the product. So we're not engineering for engineering's sake. We're not just building things to kind of keep churning things out, but we're thinking a lot about what the customer actually wants and what the customer actually needs. And I suppose that there's not maybe formal training that teaches that mindset, but it's something I think that can be really, really valuable to a developer. And a lot of really good developers that I've come across my career, in different companies, are the ones that have had that mindset of what do we actually need to do to make things better for our customers, and really focused on building things for customers and improving things that way. So whatever people can do to sort of think in that mindset, I think can really help.